I don't want to be just another dead sailor.
Am
Let's
I sailor?
pod. Let's cast. Let's get going.
Okay.
Let's talk about all the news that is news
Man,
across the
it's a
stream.
busy morning.
Yeah, we heard about the Snake River this morning. We heard about.
We heard two. Well, is it considered a verdict if you plead guilty?
No, it was a change of plea. Okay, so Kohberger, first time I've said his name right.
Is it Cole with an L?
I don't know. I think it's Kohberger or Cole.
Yeah,
what?
Kohberger,
Maybe
I
I'm not
think,
saying
but-
his name right yet. And one of these days I'll
Let's
get it
look.
right. But Mr. Berger,
Kohberger.
Kohberger, changed his plea of innocent to guilty this
Mhm.
morning, and you had a whole bucket ton of questions. So
Mhm.
let's go.
I do. So today we heard. I listened to the hearing with you,
Hmm.
and
Kind of. I was kind of not in.
yeah. Is he gonna have to say why, what he did, how the timeline went?
No, he basically said as much as he's going to say, likely
Today?
today.
So
Likely.
today was. So you didn't hear if he had to. Would you have heard that in the plea agreement? Would that be a stipulation?
No. So what often happens here, there's an agreement here for life in prison. Okay, so there's not anything to lose or to gain for him standing up and saying, this is why, this is how I was madly in love with one of the people in that room, or
Mhm.
I've just always wanted to act this way, or
I just wanted to act this way.
I've just really had an itch for killing a couple folks, and a couple didn't do it, so
Or
I
how he
did a
found
couple
them,
more
how he
too while I was at it.
found
Right?
who he was after,
Why
what
I
it
picked
was.
the sorority house, why the easy house they called it. I don't know.
I don't know who called it that except you.
No, all sorts of people on the line,
Okay.
and you can believe everything you read on the line.
Yep. Okay.
So anyway, so what happened today is you heard what was called a statement of facts. Okay.
Okay.
And the state read those. You remember the state saying this is the
Yes.
evidence that we have, and this is the statement of facts, and then the defense had to agree with the statement of facts, and so he did, and then he pled guilty to all the charges that he was charged with.
So he's not gonna have to say how he found them, how he knew about the house in the first place, or who he was really after, or what if it was everybody or if it was just one. He's not gonna have to really give any details or where the murder weapon is
No,
at
no,
all.
no.
Okay. So it's just
So for all the Dateline enthusiasts and all the online people are going to be very frustrated because they're going to have another topic to talk about here pretty quick, because this one's going to be yesterday's news before long. But no, he doesn't have to put any meat on the bone whatsoever. Now, some savvy Netflix account documentarian or something like that, or Amazon, right?
Oh, well, they're coming out with one. Is that why you're bringing that up?
No, but
okay.
I didn't know that. So somebody might go with a story on this thing, and somehow, some way, I don't know what he has to gain other than a few additional sodas and a bag of chips in prison there. But money on the books does go a long way in prison, so a little bit of money.
Did you hear anything? Would we have heard that he would be able to profit from this if he wrote a book, or if he did?
That's
tell-all type thing?
neither here nor there. So if he becomes a multimillionaire, that's a civil matter with the parents, and
But we didn't hear it like that he couldn't do that.
No, we heard that there's a penalty, a fine that a judge could impose, and
Yeah.
so
Do you remember what it was?
Well, it's $5,000
in a civil. I
per
heard
person.
something per person, up a maximum of $5,000 per person, but that's on top of. But that would be in excess of what the court deemed restitution was, which hasn't been
right.
Okay.
So the court hasn't put any restitution in place.
Will that happen at sentencing?
Yes. Yeah. So today the court accepted the plea And now we have a.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you surprised about that?
I was surprised that there was all this workup to and this effort for him to plea at this age, at this stage of the game.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some things behind the scenes. There were some things that I did not know, and I think most people did not know that were stated factually today in this hearing.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA was a little bit more of a match than we heretofore had kind of been told. But we've been hearing a lot of spin with whatever news affiliates and whatever else is rolling a story out there. And so it goes to show you that, the state had had some cards. I found particularly interesting that the police stop of his Elantra, 2015, 16, something like that. I think it was 15. Elantra, just right outside of where this area was, where the incident happened, roughly a month or so prior to this thing happening. And to me, I'm like, well, that's big, because now you've got Pennsylvania plates, you've got a whole lot more knowledge on who this Kohberger guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't seem as far or outlandish that they just go and snag somebody that fits some, bill for this with bushy eyebrows. You're going and looking all over town for bushy eyebrows, or that drives an Elantra. And so they had multiple pings for his cell phone have been in areas that were interesting.
Evidence,
the cleaner by the car found out to be interesting how it was.
The what by the car?
The cleaner. So when they searched the car, they found no DNA trace or no anything in that vehicle, which I always thought was very interesting.
Or in his apartment.
But they spun that some. They spun it saying that his home or his apartment and his vehicle had been meticulously cleaned, like just scrubbed. And so they spun it in a way that made it sound like, okay, that's suspicious because anybody that's going from a Jack in the Box back into their car is going to have some crap somewhere that's going to link you back to that Jack in the Box on Val Vista and Southern. I don't think there's a Jack in the Box on Val Vista and Southern, but there is one on Val Vista and something. Let's carry on.
Greenfield and Baseline.
Oh,
right.
Now we know. Greenfield and Baseline one did?
By the Fat Cats? The Jack in the Box did?
Huh. It shut down?
Interesting.
I've never seen a Jack in the Box shut down, I don't think.
Me either. I don't know.
Even the old school one downtown Mesa is still rolling.
Wow.
Jack needs to start doing his commercials again.
Well, I don't. Yeah. So I guess now what?
Well, now we got a sentencing, and I think he set it for Monday. So
he's July 23rd and 24th.
Okay, so he's rolling about as quickly a quick pace here.
Okay.
That sounds about right. I mean, this is it's only 3 weeks. It's for such a big case. Usually you have a month in between the change of plea and sentencing. And when they're in custody, usually it's a month. But when they're not in custody, usually you bump it out for 2 months.
Oh, really?
Especially if it's a plea that's going to require some form of incarceration. And
so the judge had said he had cleared that first week for jury selection. He had cleared no trials were going to happen at that building or in that courthouse for that whole week. And so he was saying, well, let's just do it that week, in order to get it. So I guess, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a very, very big, a lot of people have a lot of interest in this case. And so you've got some of the parents out in their cars in the parking lot, some of them calling the judge, threatening the judge. You've got the judge saying, hey, homie, don't play that, which I found that to be interesting. That's not an everyday thing where you've got just a random, victims. The victims can be pretty vindictive, and they're pretty. The judge actually explained procedure to the world today, and it said, "Look, this is what the state has the full decision. Okay, this is any kind of talked about the separation of powers.
Mm-hmm.
The executive being the state, and he's the judiciary, which in essence means as the judiciary, he's the referee. He's refereeing for between Kohberger, and the state
Idaho.
of Idaho. And so Idaho makes the decision as to what penalty
without the judges.
Anything. Also,
Mm-hmm.
but the judge has to accept it. Okay, he has to accept it. Make sure that the defendant is, aware and capable of making a decision here, and making sure that it's in the best interest of justice. Okay, that is what the judge is doing. He's just making sure everything's fair and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. The state is offering it. Everybody's up in arms like, well, the victim said no. 2 of the 4 victims said no. Who cares? It's very frustrating as a defense attorney, all those many years, very frustrating how many times the state overcompensates for the victim, goes way overboard. Police do it too. If you call detective friendly all the time, they're going to want to just send up some charges just to get you from not calling them anymore.
Wow.
So victims have a lot of push, a lot of pull.
The victim's family had asked the public if they shared that same sentiment as them to call and let the judge to please, what's the word? Advocate on their behalf. Mm-hmm. So he was saying, I think he was trying to say, people from the public were the ones calling, trying to influence.
I thought he called out one father in particular.
He didn't call out anyone in particular. I told you who it was.
Oh.
That person, their whole family posted that they were furious and that the state of Idaho had failed them. They do not accept this. This is not what they wanted. If anyone shares this sentiment, please advocate the
judge. How long has
judge.
this case been going on? Like, when did this happen? What date did this thing happen? The original sin.
November 13th, 2022.
Okay. And they need to find a life. I mean, this is a tragedy, and this is a long time from that tragedy now, and they should have some stability here. I've seen some victims show some remarkable resolve and be incredibly forgiving for somebody that's done some of the worst things you can imagine. In a sense, I've always respected that quite a bit, being just an observer of it, because I know how hard that must be for them. But how much easier I see them running through life than other folks that are victimized, that act more victim-like, that, the state of Idaho failed us. The guy's going to prison forever. Okay, he's never getting out. It's not like he's living a high life anymore. You just got closure to who did it, for sure. You had somebody admit to doing this matter this morning. So, to me, look, I don't ever hope to be in that situation, but I hope if I find myself in a situation wherein something tragic like that were to have happened, I would hope that I wouldn't lose my...
You would never know what you do, but
my integrity and my character there.
2 of the families were at peace with that. One was that they support it 100%. Another is we support that, and then the other 2 are we wanted our peers to make that decision, not the prosecution or not the... I can understand that to a degree, that part.
That's just not how the system works.
Why do you think they made a plea? Or they offered a plea? After all this, why did this happen so quick? If you had to guess,
I would assume that the defense had probably inquired as to offers,
solicited it, kind of
inquired as to offers on this thing.
Why was the state willing to?
Oftentimes, the state is unwilling to do an offer, to present an offer. I think the state was probably willing in this particular matter because who knows which way it was going to go. You can kind of see the wild card of the victims' families right now and all this media hoopla and how something's boomeranging over here and something's popping over here and all the, armchair quarterbacking on the judge, on the prosecutor, on the defense, and so on and so forth. So right now it seems kind of odd that all this work went into it only to kind of all the air went out of the balloon.
In one weekend or one day. That's what I don't get. I don't get why after all the time, this, late hour, like the 30th hour, what do they call it?
The 11th hour.
The 11th hour. Like it is, a month away, the trial is. And the state has never offered anything or attempted. I think the opposite. They said, no, we intend to seek the death penalty. Never pursued an offer, and the defense was very adamant about innocence. And I just don't understand how this culminated.
Well, what you don't know is what's going on behind closed doors.
Sure.
And so there's prosecutors and defense folks, and I don't know if, we've had clients that have never admitted what they've done.
Yeah.
And we've had clients that have admitted very, very tragic things, terrible things. And so those that don't admit what they've done, you don't have an idea. And I don't know what happened here. And I don't know what Kohberger told his legal team. I have no idea. And so that said, I don't know what his legal team did outside of, okay, well, they're going after the death penalty and they're going after blood. There's really no reason not to fight this case. There's no reason not to try it. Let's go. What's the worst that can happen? You know what I mean? They're already going for it. So for them to offer something that's just a slight tweak from the death penalty to life in prison, and to have Kohberger take it, to me means that he didn't like the evidence against him. There was something in there that was going to tip the scales. I heard a little bit more than I thought they had today. That would make me uneasy as a defense attorney.
Okay. So you would have taken
that traffic stop really made me uneasy. Ooh, that puts him right down the street in the Elantra that everybody's heard of. Blah, blah, blah. It just means he's casing the joint for quite some time. He's in that little area for a few months before this whole thing happened. And to me, that's just like, why else would you be there? There's no fishing stores. It's a little nook of a bunch of, apartments and a living quarters there.
But people from both colleges intermingle all the time. That could explain it. Over all those months, he also went down to that third place.
It's too coincidental. That stop is really coincidental. Too coincidental. Then they got the Amazon with the knife itself. And the DNA match directly to the father of him.
Yeah.
That was...
You knew that. We knew that.
Yeah, but it was painted a little bit more partial DNA. And that's more of a direct hit because they took his DNA when he was apprehended into custody, and it was a direct hit.
Right. It was muddy to me because you hear the knife sheath, of course. But when you start looking, if you look around that and you look at the shortcuts here, we didn't explore this DNA any further. We didn't go into any genealogy sites for the blood on the glove or that DNA or the DNA on blood on the railing or under the fingernails of Maddie. We didn't go any further for that, but we went for this. It starts for me to muddy and then they won't provide.
Of his property
hold on, wait.
under a dead body.
I understand. But they wouldn't provide how they got to the DNA or how they wouldn't provide the paper trail. And that to me, so unless, there's
a lot of risk on defending this case, but then again, there's very little risk of defending this case because it's either life in prison or you're going to basically almost your whole life in prison with an axe hanging over your head for whatever else. For the executioner to come, but that almost always never does.
Because of appeals and stuff?
Yeah, appeals, and they never get quite around to it. Not many people get the death penalty. It's a big, great threat, but that never gets used, or it is used very seldom.
Okay.
So the end of the day,
Yeah.
this case would have been a toughie to defend. However, what do you have to lose? And so he loses with this plea agreement. He loses all sorts of ability to appeal just by virtue of him entering into a plea. Okay, so you're very limited on your appellate options there. You're very limited. Here in Arizona, you have what's called a PCR, a post-conviction relief. You can.
Did that include that?
I'm assuming Idaho has post-conviction relief.
I'm sorry.
Very high bar. Very high bar.
But did that plea deal include no appeals, no post-conviction?
You can't kick that out. That's a post-conviction relief, and so you can't eat that away.
Got it.
Okay, that's a right that you have. That means that you did not understand this plea, and you entered into it without everybody explaining it to you, or there was some things in there that you did not agree with, or so on and so forth, and you can prove that. Now, we all heard this judge read. We all heard the defendant agree multiple times after this judge reread his rights, and you also have to sign the plea that has all this stuff written that you're reading, okay, that your attorney is supposed to explain to you line by line by line by line by line, and you actually initial all the
boxes, like
all the boxes, all the provisions, all the terms and provisions. And so you have this outside post-conviction relief, which is basically ineffective assistance of counsel.
And so there's no way to waive that. Like there's no way that he's waiving that.
You can't waive that.
There's no way that's included in this.
No. And so when people started talking like, oh, in the plea agreement, it takes away all his appeals. Well, it's a plea agreement. Plea agreements take away most of your appeals. I mean, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So it's a little bit of an uneducated statement by a plea agreement's taking away the appeals. Yes, plea agreements take away many, many options.
He's actually waiving his appellate rights.
Yes. Many appellate options. There are still some that remain. One that comes to mind is the post-conviction relief or ineffective assistance of counsel.
Well, she has called herself, Ann Taylor, or the
I find it odd that she started talking that way a few weeks ago.
She has called herself, it's clear as day. Like this is clear. I am clearly calling this, I am not effective counsel.
Yeah. And so
interesting.
I find that to be an interesting move if we were to see him, probably the name of this thing is if we were to see him move for an appeal, that would have been set up by those statements. I don't see it happening, to be honest with you, but we'll see. I mean, I didn't see him.
How long do they have?
I didn't see him pleading out this morning either.
I didn't either. Yeah, no one saw that.
I mean, it's a big, beautiful day for law. We got Diddy that's walking free, probably. Yeah. We got Kohberger that's entering, a prison of nobody's choice, and we've got and it was such a hot topic for a long time.
I thought there's a trial. I thought there was going to be a.
Would have been things to debate and things to talk through, but the reality here is like we talked about last time, how to win a trial. This would have been more challenging with that approach, because now it looks.
We didn't know
like I've got a stalker.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they did make it seem like there was a way. I guess when they said his cell phone connected to the tower, that doesn't convince me because they also have tons of Ring cameras, obviously, and security footage around that area, which they had of the night of. They would easily be able to pull footage from those dates at those times. They have the timestamp or the time.
The phone off and the phone back on, and the phone back
Sketchy.
on with him leaving Moscow.
South of Moscow.
Right? Very interesting.
Not leaving it, but down.
Right.
Yeah.
Down by that camera from I think a vendor store, something like that caught it. This case became much harder to defend after the factual basis was read today. And the factual basis typically does slant a little bit towards the state, but they're really kind of
Well,
boring, and the facts are these. And this particular individual, the individual that read it, put some things in there that didn't need to be, like
really?
added. Well, just didn't need to be like, well, to be completely thorough. There was no sex that was
Yeah.
had. There'd be completely thorough. There was, I mean, just inserted some
Like there was
information that
no,
really didn't need to be there.
hmm
No
no
allegations of
speculation.
that are around, and so it didn't really have to go there, but they
No, there
did.
has been. People have said that. I've heard weird sources say that, or weird
Uh,
experts that say that
oh,
this has sexual component or anyway, I don't know. I could see why he inserted that or why just from what I've seen, which really isn't that much even if
well, I mean, he could always probably get a prison weight loss program going, and because he's really good at losing
he looks
weight,
thinner even
he's
today.
really good at losing weight, and so
Different
he probably
haircut.
help some of the
Hmm.
inmates out there, and probably sell his program on the Netflix or something else like Amazon or whatever. You never know what they're going to do here with this,
Hmm.
because there's going to be people that are going to inquire as to his state of mind, like you are, why the why piece of this whole thing, and that doesn't
I
excite me
mean,
as much as it does others, but I
or
understand.
just even, saying the whole story, I guess, not just a yes, I did it. Yes, I did it, but kind of a where did this
That's
start?
all the law requires.
Hmm.
And so him going off on a this is why I did it isn't going to do anything
Or
at
how
this
it went
point.
down, kind of, I
It's
guess.
not going to
Okay.
be anything. There's nothing to mitigate. So so literally the sentencing of this bad boy is not. It's going to be pageantry. It's going to be straight up pageantry. You're going to have the families up
Hmm.
there saying how bad of loss they had.
Hmm.
Obviously, they did.
Hmm.
You're going to have the state is going to take forever. The defense probably won't take. If they take more than a minute and a half to 5 minutes, I
So
eat my hat.
this plea, it's a fixed plea,
Yeah,
but the court
stipulated
is
plea.
okay.
That's what they call it. Stipulated plea.
So he gets 10 years or less for robbery. He gets life in prison or theoretically less. The court is not held to these standards,
Yeah,
but that's the max. And of
he'll
course
get
he'll get
maxed out.
sure. I was just wondering what you thought of that.
Yeah, he'll get maxed out. And so the defense, if they felt like it was going to be anything but that, so they might argue,
So
but
there
I don't see him saying guilty too, and then having them pipe up with a big argument at this point.
yeah, well, part of that plea said that he's not allowed to even ask or for a lighter sentence, or his side is not allowed.
I wouldn't imagine they were gonna. If I were
Yeah.
his representative, I would not.
Even
I
entertain
wouldn't
it.
even entertain
Yeah.
saying a word. And
Okay.
it's just going to be a long. Better bring your tissues, and it's just going to be a long what everybody lost. And I wish to tell you it's cathartic. I wish to tell you that it's really assuages the soul, and it's like chicken noodle soup for it and all that jazz. It's not.
Hmm.
And it's closure is a private thing and a personal
Mhm.
thing, and obviously there's some folks still searching for that. And how great this loss was, it's very
Mhm.
great and a terrible tragic loss, but nonetheless it's been 3 years, and there should be some coping mechanisms built in on some level.
Well, hopefully now maybe they can, since they're not having to prepare for a trial. You know what I mean? To sit
I don't
face
know.
and
I think
listen
they
to the
were liking it.
details.
It seemed it to me.
Listen to the
I'm not going to be the
details.
most popular dude out on the
There's a
line
lot
right
of
now,
the
but
families that were quiet. You didn't hear from
I
them.
respect that.
One family sat and said, we're going to tell our story once," and they gave it. Um,
I respect that too.
and others haven't even spoken, and
That's probably the way I'd probably roll.
but there's still, it's like you have to go listen
Salute.
to the details of the trial, the details of their things that are very, disturbing. Because
Hmm.
I'm sure these autopsies, everything is gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They likely don't know the full extent, I would think.
Hmm. I would assume that they have a pretty good idea.
You have to sit and watch pictures if you're gonna represent
Well,
your
since you've
child.
got leakers, who knows where they came from, right? I mean, we always assume that it's law enforcement, and it probably was, but
Well, the judge said it likely was. I
well,
guess so.
it sounds like it
Makes
likely would
sense.
be. It makes the
Mhm.
most sense. And I wonder what's going to happen there. I wonder if that investigation is going to continue on, or if everybody's kind of taking a sigh of relief that
Mhm.
that he pled out. We're
We're gonna drop it. Just
we're
leave this where
outside
it's
the
at.
crosshairs now.
Mhm.
I don't know.
We're gonna leave it where it's at.
Leave
And
or
move
be.
on to the next one.
Any other
Something.
questions?
What do you think the P Diddy verdict?
No, I saw that one coming. I've never seen anybody accused of RICO, a singular defendant in a RICO case. So I'm not going to get on the Diddy thing. I never really cared much about that case. I just found it so weird that there was one person accused of a criminal enterprise. That's what RICO is. It's to get a conspiracy where this person is trafficking this, and this person picks it up here, and this person does this, and this person gets the money, and this person da 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 da. It's to bring down organized crime.
So why would they pursue it? I don't understand
I
why
don't
these
either.
things get charged. I really wonder why would that get charged that way
From Jump Street, I
if
felt
it did not fit.
from Jump Street, I felt like Diddy was likely going to walk
Yeah, you did say that.
because it's a conspiracy charge with one person charged. So what's he in cahoots with himself? Now he's for sure
they
not a good
hoping-
dude, but he's in
Yeah.
cahoots with himself.
Why were they hoping he would out others? Do you think? And they were hoping to kind of fall out. As it
Well,
came
there's a
along?
lot of
What do you-
speculation
why
that
would they
now
ever
he's
do
going
that?
to roll
How
on a lot of
embarrassing.
people. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation that he's going to roll on a lot of folks.
Why would he now? He's been acquitted.
I don't know. We're going to find out what happens to the Diddy. Or do we call him Puffy? Or do we call him Sean? Or do we call him...
John.
She has a pet name for him.
No, that's his brand name of clothes.
Sean
His name is
John?
Sean John. It's Sean John. That's a different brand of his under his empire. Look it up. Sean John clothing.
Okay.
I know of which they speak.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Mm-hmm. Is it made in America at least? I have no idea. So, and now I think it's Sean Combs and doesn't go by P. Diddy, which he went by Puff Daddy for my whole life until, I'm just kidding, until he changed it.
You see what I'm working with here?
Do you see what I'm working with? Uneducated fool. This is, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know nothing about
No,
the
I
Sean
don't know
John.
anything about him now, but yeah, Sean John clothing is.
I know about long johns. Those are coming in
high-end-
handy when we're hunting in the mountains and it's cold.
Anyway, I just was wondering why they would charge it. Why federal? Don't we trust our federal government to?
If we've learned
deliver?
anything over the last handful of years is what does the government do right? I
Interesting.
mean, the president we have right now was indicted 1,064 times.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
So the lawfare right now is really kind of. I appreciated that judge putting some
Mhm.
good old fashioned honor back in the justice system and educating the folks that were watching it live.
Mhm.
I appreciated. That's what I've heard 1,016 times. I appreciated hearing those things. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the way it does roll
Mhm.
most of the time. Most of the time. But you do have your one-offs. You have your Diddy things. You have your political.
Massachusetts things.
You
or
got your
the-
political thing. You got
Okay.
your Boston, the Reed deal. You definitely, and that
Canton.
one's about as dirty as all
Canton.
get out. So we'll have to talk
Yeah.
about that one again because
Yeah, that we had a suggestion today on TikTok.
yeah, on the TikTok. Who knew? We're gonna
We
talk
were-
about
a
that one
case
next go.
Suggestion of Sandra Birchmore. is her
Sandra
name,
Birchmore,
which I-
cliffhanger.
I just know some details, but the same law enforcement as Karen Reed
Yep.
involving
Name
cops.
this pod. What now?
That's probably a really good one. For all that encompasses all three cases we discussed.
I reckon so.
What's been your favorite part so far?
Of what?
All this talk. All these cases you learned about. For me.
I think my favorite part is I have no personal anything going on with any of it. I have no real interest in it. I have no investment, no interest whatsoever. And I get to kind of look at it like a baseball coach looks at another team that he has no investment in, doesn't care what that team's doing, so he can just kind of look at it and just see, oh, that right fielder's got a good arm. Oh, that center fielder's a little bit slow on the jump. Left, you know what I mean? Can kind of just look
Yeah.
at some things and
Commentate.
kind of be a commentator. It's been fun to commentate on these things, and they have a lot of interest for a lot of folks. But when you've done this for as many years as we've done here at the Arizona firm,
Yeah.
it's kind of like
That's why I think we actually do have an investment in these cases, and to some degree, because these things represent what's happening in cases we represent, and cases that our peers represent, and cases sometimes that I think there is an indirect investment. That's what it's interesting to me.
I liked. There's a few things that I'm disappointed in, discouraged about, or otherwise. I'll rant about it for a minute. 10, 15 years ago, you would see some enormous acts of courage, whether it be somebody we represented, whether it be a victim, whether it be somebody that was affiliated with the particular case that did something horrific. You would have some pretty solid victims sometimes that weren't victims, didn't like to be called victims. And
You're saying they did good things with this situation, the situation they were dealt.
Yes, and they would speak at sentencing, and oftentimes back in the day when I was most impressed, they would speak with. I wish it could have been a little bit lighter for this particular individual. I understand, and I hope that he can turn his eyes towards the right way to live when he gets out, and so on and so forth. And these are people with children that are shot. These are people with sexual undertones that have been that somebody very dear to them has sustained a loss. This is the mother of somebody that was shot and killed. That was amazing. I don't see that anymore. I don't see that. I see a grand victimization. Now, you brought up a good point with Kohberger. You have some of the victims that are just kind of want to be left alone, and some are just really rowdy and out there and loud,
and
trying
angry.
and angry. And look, life's, and nobody thinks there's going to be some psychopath that's going to go cruise over and kill, and nobody's expecting you to be
happy about it.
Yeah, happy about it, or even accept it, or not be hurt by it. But life's, and when tragedy strikes, you can move on and figure out how you can be a victim, because we call them victims, or you can
They are to a degree.
They are a victim.
Yeah, they are.
Or
victims.
you can be. I love this old lady that just refused to be called a victim. I loved her, and I just thought she's the happiest person that's been on that side of this type of thing that I've ever seen. And there's peace in forgiveness. There's peace in enduring. There's peace in moving one step in front of the other, and she did not like that her grandson was accused, and probably rightfully so, of some really heinous things. That said, she was an incredibly gracious individual when it came down to being a victim. She did not want to be called a victim. And I've seen quite a few spots like that. I've seen some pretty tough defendants that kind of get hosed, have to do a lot more years than they were thinking would be fair. And I was thinking way too many years for this to be fair. But
they're exploited.
No, it just was it just didn't work out too good. It wasn't unfair. It fell within the normal.
Okay.
But I'm a little greedy. I like being underneath that. But that said, it wasn't that. But it's like, well, I guess I'm going to have some work to do in prison. I visited Dwayne that one time and rattled, we ended up getting a plea agreement for 3 years, and he just looked at me, and he'd been in isolation for 18 months. So that means just in a jail cell for 23 hours a day alone for 18 months, you're out for an hour. And I took him very excited to convey that I'd gotten the plea down to 3 years. And he said, I need 5. And I said, you
Yeah,
want
I
me to go
remember.
back to the prosecutor and ask for more time? What?
Mhm.
And then he just sat me down. We're obviously in jail, so he's across the bars from me. He's like, "Well, this is what I have figured out." He had it all penciled out, what he needed to accomplish while in prison, so he could be clean and sober and a better human being when he got out. And as far as I know, he has been doing real well. So that was many years ago. I'm a little bit disappointed, and maybe it's just the whole social media part of things, or it's the the need for attention, or whatever the case might be. But I don't understand ugly victims.
Hmm.
I feel bad for them. I feel bad for them not just because of the loss, but because of so much more. And I don't understand that. I find that that's a mindset that's not terribly it's not a healthy mindset. Thanks for the dude back there. I don't even know if your
Microphone's on?
microphone's
It's
not
not.
even on. Any other
Well,
questions?
would you have taken that deal if you were his attorney? If you've been his attorney, would you take that?
Well, I'm assuming I would have known all this stuff all along, like all the evidence, or for quite some time. I'd assume that I'd had a pretty good head start on knowing what that evidence is. If I felt, and this is a conversation that you have with clients all the time, and our attorneys here have this conversation every day with our clients, it is we don't have a winning hand. And so we're trying to get the best plea we can. This is a little bit of a unique case wherein a good plea here is there is no such thing.
Hmm.
We've represented a few cases like that where there is no good plea.
That's fine, but would you have taken that plea without?
It's usually the defendant's choice. We're private, so they're paying out the nose for our straightforward information.
Would you encourage that client in particular to take this plea?
In certain circumstances, you just develop a relationship with the client, and that relationship is basically they're calling the shots because they're the boss. Now, I'll advise. I don't know what I would have advised here. I don't know what. See, the thing about a plea agreement is all that strategy, all the stuff that you've been trying to put together to defend this individual goes bye-bye.
Well, you said you're greedy.
Yeah. I'd like to
And
think I have some magic wand
I've
to
seen
pour
you
over
be
this
greedy.
thing.
I've seen you be I've seen you be effective and correct. And so I guess I'm wondering if you would take this. You would
I
encourage.
don't know. I don't know.
So this was his decision.
I think it'd
This,
be foolish for me to say I could have done a much better job than anybody else. I think that it's foolish to say
it's just about a risk, right? The gamble.
it's a gamble. It's a risk that they're going to take, and it's their risk. It's their butt, not mine.
Mhm.
And so, sure, I might get a book deal out of the deal or whatever, but I mean, it's the client's risk.
Mhm.
And so,
So why not?
to look at this, I heard the change of plea. I didn't like some of those facts that I didn't know. Some of them I did not know.
Mhm.
And I thought, that would have been more challenging in my mind. That would have been,
But wouldn't you have
because those
asked
are
for a deal
real
much
facts.
earlier than this?
Who's to say they didn't? They could have asked for a deal much earlier than this.
But so if they did, then
Like
why
they
would the
could have
state
asked for a
say
deal 2
no?
years ago.
Right. And why would the state say no, but now all of a sudden?
The state does not have to make an offer.
Oh, I understand. So why this late in the game? Back to that,
Probably
that kind
because
of
the
thing.
state wanted to put this is a circus. I mean, I can see
So
why the state would want to plea.
convenience?
I would see why the state, convenience. It's way cheaper, and
Is
it's
it?
and it's cleaner. I mean, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And the state may have been jammed up on these victims.
Hmm.
I'm going to go on record and say I think they probably were.
I guess if they were, so intent on the principle, no, we're going to seek the death penalty for
Right.
this. So we're hung up on that for all this time.
And how much do you think the state really cared about that piece?
I don't know.
Probably not much. Well, let me tell you who did.
The victims.
Right. We're seeing that
two
right
of the
now.
Victims. Yeah.
And who knows if all of them weren't saying it once upon a time. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is we're seeing it right now. And so that was maybe driving the bus for a long period of time. Unfortunately, we get to see victims be very loud and very kind of quietly commandeer the case.
Steve Gonzalez, the father of one of the girls, and he is an public advocate for, this. This is the opposite of what their family wanted, and is very vocal about it.
Mm-hmm.
So he said once Judge Hitler demanded the special investigator. He demanded a special investigator, I believe, for the Dateline leak. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it was not that. Maybe it was for something else. But once he said this has been on the rails, they got on the rails for a plea deal right away. And I was wondering what you thought of that. So it sounds like from him, who's very vocal all this time, he's very out with it all. He says as soon as Hitler made that demanded a special investigator, the gears switched. They got on the rails, trying to get a plea deal, or on the, and I think that was for the Dateline leak.
Mm-hmm.
A special investigator he demanded it. He was very angry.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the prosecution decided.
Is this the same incredibly vocal victim's parent?
Who didn't attend? He was outside walking. Yeah.
Yeah, I question that, but okay. I don't think that that's true. I think that the state likely held the cards
the whole time.
I do feel like it probably is more likely what happened here, opinion only.
Mm-hmm.
It likely what happened here is the defense fished for a plea agreement quite a few times. And there was no plea offer made.
How come? Before and now,
sometimes
and all
the
of a
state,
sudden, yeah.
Sometimes the state digs in their heels, and almost every time that happens, there's a victim behind it. So you remember that case we did up in Kingman,
Yes.
and how loud and ugly that was,
Yes.
and how harsh that was.
Mm-hmm.
That was victim driven. That's why that was so hard to tailor that little deal we made with our client. So that was victim driven. And in that little town, everybody knows everything and so on and so forth. And so you just got to be that much more. So it was really hard for that prosecutor to make that offer until we finally convinced him that it would benefit him in the long run.
For the real.
Just for the case at large. If we start talking about that case, it's easy to look it up.
Yeah. I guess my last only question from that would be, since if that's true, you think they maybe tried to get an offer a few times before and weren't given one?
Yeah.
And why would they now? The 11th hour, do you think it could possibly be because I guess the Dateline thing, do you think that kind of brought into question?
If nothing else, you have a lot of moving parts. As a prosecutor, you are expected to win. Period. End of story. And there's a stress to that expectation. And then there's also the fact that the defense didn't roll over and has been fighting pretty well and had some hits. had some lands.
Mhm.
And so for them to make an offer here on the footsteps
Mhm.
of the court or of trial, for them to make an offer is not completely unheard of. It's just most cases don't get this far down.
Yeah.
Civil cases that are worth lots and lots and lots of money, they do this all the time.
Sure.
This is how they do business. This is how the sausage is made there.
Hmm.
But criminal, typically, if it gets
You're just typically
past a certain,
negotiating the terms of a plea deal. Usually, it seems, or like there's a lot of time spent on that part.
once you
or
get past
given-
once you get on the track to trial, unless the plea agreement is like it's an offer you can't refuse, which that does happen.
Sure.
And it happens quite a bit. I mean, sometimes you've just got to really muscle up and put together a really good defense, but then you've got an offer you can't refuse in front of you. Again, your client is making that decision, and most of the time they're going to take that and not take the risk of something going kittywampus in trial.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'd say it was a victim-driven matter that got them this far down the road. Like the state felt a little bit, hate to use the word bully because I don't believe in them, but a little bullied by the victims and the scenario, how ugly this particular scenario is.
Just strung up by...
I think it's one of the ugliest parts of our justice system is how loud they allow the voice of those that are hurting, those that are hurt. Okay? Most of the time, hurt people hurt people. And so I'm not trying to say that two wrongs make a right or anything like that. I'm just trying to say that it's an unfortunate obstacle in the pursuit of justice sometimes.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's an unfortunate obstacle in the pursuit of justice. Write that down. Put it on my gravestone.
I'm sorry. Okay, can we repeat this?
I don't know. We're done.